Welcome to the Tomb Raider Level Editor Basic Guide. In this chapter I will show you how to create a simple room. Section A. Result Showcase. Remember that all rooms are made up of these three layers: geometry, textures, and lights. By the end of this guide, you will learn to create one simple room. Section B. Shaping Geometry. You can manipulate each square by small increments called clicks. Select a square and press Q to raise it by one click. You can press A to lower it. Similarly, press S to lower a ceiling and W to raise it. This can also be used on walls. You can hold Shift to raise and lower by 4 click increments. If you select a square by clicking it twice, arrows will appear. These arrows allow you to raise or lower one side of a square to make it sloped. It also works on ceilings and walls. Use this to create more complex shapes. You can hold click and drag the cursor to select several squares. This lets you manipulate the geometry of the selected area. If you would like to add an extra wall in the room, select a square and press the Set Wall button next to the minimap. Select the Floor button to remove a wall. If you raise a slope by 3 clicks, Lara will begin to slide when she is on that square. Be sure to avoid 2 sliding slopes that are facing each other. Activate Draw Illegal Slopes and Draw Slide Directions so you can be aware of the shapes you're making. Now let's try corner slopes. Hold Ctrl and click on a square to select one corner. You can raise or lower that corner of the floor or ceiling. This splits a square in 2 triangles. Hold Alt when clicking on a triangle to change its orientation. Remember to avoid overlapping as it causes walls to disappear. There is a trick used to avoid stretching textures by segmenting a wall. When selecting a square or wall, press E to raise a floor's wall segment and press D to lower it. This also works for the ceiling with the R and F buttons. Now, using the skills you've just learned, create a similar room to this. As you see around the area that you built, there is a lot of unneeded space. To crop out that space, select the area you want to keep. Right-click and select Crop Room. Remember to save your progress every now and then. Section C. Texture Painting. Now that we have built a room, click on the empty texture panel on the right to browse for textures. For this tutorial, I'm going to use the texture pack from Tomb Raider 4's Coastal Ruins level. You can adjust the panel by resizing, zooming, and using the scrolling bars. Click on a texture to select it and switch to texturing mode. Now you can apply a texture to a square by clicking on it. Try to experiment with the different texture painting tools. For example, selecting several squares and use the Fill tool. It will fill the selected area with the texture you have selected. Here I try to texture a one-click wall, but the texture ends up getting squished. Let's try to fix this. On the corners of your selected texture, drag the point to match the shape of the face you want to paint. Now the texture won't be squished anymore. You can hold Alt and click on a texture face to quickly reselect it in the same manner it was applied. Now continue texturing your room using the techniques we have just learned. Notice the ceiling texture. It's not rotated the way I want. Hold Shift and click to rotate the texture. You can even hold Ctrl and click on a texture to mirror it. But look here, if you noticed, the textures on this wall are very stretched. This can be fixed by going to geometry editing mode again. Raise the floor and ceilings appropriately, and then go back to texture mode to apply the rest of the textures. Repeat this process where you deem fit to prevent the stretching of textures. If you would like to add an extra texture set, click on the plus sign on the texture panel and browse for a new set. I will be using the set from Cleopatra's Palaces. Up until now, we have been using 64 by 64 pixel textures. To select the larger portion of the texture pane, select 128 from the drop-down menu. Now we're going to texture the triangles on the floor with this texture, but this doesn't look right. It is difficult to get the right orientation when rotating triangulated faces. To fix this easily, press the backtick button on your keyboard to rotate the entire selection. Then reapply the textures accordingly. By default, textures are cropped to prevent severe distorting. If you would like to untoggle the feature, click here. Now continue filling the room. At this stage, don't worry about making changes to the geometry if you don't like how it looks. Section D. Lights and Shadows. Unfortunately, our textured room still looks flat despite our efforts. We can give it some depth using simple lighting techniques. Switch to lighting mode and then click here to change the ambient light. This palette affects the ambient levels of the room. Since this is an indoors room, let's keep it dark and give it a very slight blue tinge. Before we add some lights, we have to be aware of how light enters the room. I have textured the recessed ceiling here with the grid holes to make it look like the light is coming through here. Now I have to add the actual light. Let's start using the most common lighting method. Click on the point light bulb and then place it in the room. You can move it by using the arrows around it. Hold Ctrl while dragging it to move it around flexibly. And hold Shift if you want to move it in precise small increments. But simply dragging it will move it in much larger increments. We want to place our point bulb in the center of the ceiling, as that is our light source. You can change the color by clicking here. Pick a warm light to contrast against the dark blue ambient light we have picked. Let's increase the intensity of the light to have more contrast. Hold Shift while increasing or decreasing to change the value with larger increments. You can also change the inner or outer radius of the point bulb similarly. Let's try a different light type. A spotlight bulb. What makes it different from the point bulb is that you can rotate where it points to by dragging the rings around it. Additionally, you can also increase the inner and outer distance of the spotlight, or increase the size of the inner or outer cones. Another light type is the sun bulb. This type of bulb can be rotated similarly to the spotlight, but it affects the entire room. It is generally used in outside rooms as its namesake suggests, but advanced builders use it indoors as well with a very soft intensity to add some depth to the area. You can experiment with these lights to get an appealing result. Here, I try to add very soft point light to give depth to the walls around the room. Now, our last bulb is a shadow bulb. You can use it to add artificial darkness to the area. Change the intensity if you would like a stronger or softer shadow. If you want to copy any bulb, use the keyboard shortcuts Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V to copy and paste. Do not be afraid of adding some colored bulbs around to make the place less boring. It is a good idea to add lights where there isn't a light source, otherwise your level would be pitch black most of the time in those caves. Take the starting area of Tomb of Seth from Tomb Raider 4 for example. It was a dark cave, but filled with colorful lights. Experimentation will allow you to hone your own lighting style. If you have played custom levels before, you'd have noticed that each builder has their distinct style. It is almost like a fingerprint that sets some from others. Section E. playing your creation. Now that we have completed our room, let's start playing it. But wait, where would Lara begin? That's right, she must be placed in the level, otherwise the level would not launch. Lara's 3D model is located inside a WOD file. We have to select a WOD file first by clicking on the Empty Items panel on the left. I will be selecting the Coastal Ruins WOD file. It will load all of its 3D models in our project. Drag and drop Lara from that list into the room and move her to an appropriate place. Open Tomb IDE and navigate to the Script tab. Click on Build Script and wait for the game script to create itself. We will look into its content in the future advanced guides, but for now you only need to do this a single time. If you compile your level now, there will be no sound effects. To fix that, open your level settings from the Tools menu and navigate to Sound Infos. Click on the plus sign and click on the XML file that shares the name of your WOD. This ensures that the 3D model in your level will be playing the correct sounds. Now we are ready to compile the level. Press on the Build and Play button to launch the level. Look around your creation. Don't hesitate to go back to the editor to change things. This is the end of Chapter 2 of the basic guide. I hope this has been helpful to you.